As the Watcher, when I began my forays into the realm of the Watched, there is a transformation I now feel, because I must be and feel the form I take. Should I choose the raven, and should his need exceed previous designs, the raven would have to be successful at being a raven in order to assist. I could not command a raven in all fairness, but I could masquerade as any form I desired. So I had the perfect disguise for any intent. But I realized when I crossed the line, I can only remember what I really strive to remember. I forget very quickly that I was and am the Watchman. Like a tether, I must not go too far. But it is my intent to right some wrongs along the way, if I may.
Hi, do you want to make your own podcast for free? Try Anchor. It's the easy way. Anchor gives you creation tools needed. You can use your own phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to the right platforms, Apple, Spotify, and all the big ones. You can make money on your podcast no matter the size of your audience. So download the free Anchor app and get started.
As the Watcher, I would have told myself easily there are no free passes down there in the world of the living, the world of the flesh, the most interesting of all worlds. All eyes are upon this dimension, but I am a watcher, allowed to participate. But there is a price. For this world is demanding of energy, and it's a very dangerous place to try to live. But as their watcher, I came to care for them, because they're a wonderful lot, and I want to see them succeed. And so tonight, the story begins with the raven, perched upon the proper sill to observe the necessary details to achieve what in this realm would be a very important engagement. And in unison with the night, the raven stirs. His eye is keen, and the night is his friend. It wasn't just the raven. My energy as the watchman was always strongest at midnight. In most occasions I could accomplish my aims within an hour and a half or less, and I would always watch the clock and keep up with the ticks and the talks. And the raven, as the watchman, guarded forces needed. The owl was in on the game, and the animals, being the watcher of them all, I knew their strengths and their weaknesses as I chose them and enlisted them in my ranks. And as all mercenaries, they must be paid in full. And as the watcher, I was certain to carry much treasure. You pay lots of attention to details like the moon. The strength of the moon can add much vitality to the energy required. And tonight the moon was full, and the stars assisted, and the wee creatures were in attendance and listening. And you could gain control of the small creatures. The smallest amongst them could be of greatest aid. As the watcher, you know there are no small friends. And if you're careful, your enemies will be few, as they should be. Time was always of essence. Tick, tock. We must be aware of the clock. The moon, the beautiful moon, booming, the boon of the moon. You could feel its energy. You could see it as the bat, the flutter. You see, the food of the night is any scrap of light that can be had, but some prefer the dark, as both can be of aid. As the wolf sees the night as the farmer sees the day. And so I had the eyes I need. We had the falcons and the crows, the ravens, even the songbirds, and the crickets were in tune. We were getting assistance, and the night was weaving a wonderful web. And what are the creatures of the night that you know not of? How many of you have taken the flight of the raven at the stroke of 3 a.m. and fluttered to the proper sill? How many of you know the mysteries of the night and the happenings in the wood where the nymphs and the mushrooms and the spores and all manner of life emerge. Life you never knew of, washed away by the golden showers of the morning dew. And the world persists unbeknownst to most, but not to the watcher, who failed not to enlist available host. A host being someone who was happy to assist, you see. And they all were certainly happy to assist in tonight's affair, where confusion and seclusion required our action, and we are almost at the point of assembly, a roll call to test for the proceedings shall and must go as planned. The only part of our mission that we have planned is that we plan to succeed in our aims, and we always do. The night of the world and the world of the night are just as meticulous in their doings as the ticking of the day and the talking of the night. The ways of the wood and the night, with the moon directing the orchestra. There's immense power. The animals, everything in the wood is attuned to the celestial lights to guide them. The moon, the stars. They need not the tawdry additions that mankind has provided. They are distractions. And the modern creatures, scast out of the wood, are still about and very useful. The whole objective is to work together. We have our objective. You see, tomorrow morning a king is about to sign a very important document, one that could be very hurtful for centuries, and perhaps, the course of history could change. Who knows what would happen? I've been allowed to do what I may. And this, I decided, was the most important occasion for the personal assistance of the Watchman. You see, I had to not become involved into my forays, and not to make alliances or cause delays. But there were only a few ticks and talks left on the clock. And so it was with this need for precision that we enlisted the devices of the Raven. A murder was assembled, and no one else would know of any more details until the moon crested the far ridge in a southeasterly direction, 30 ticks from now, and 29 talks. And the waiting was most difficult when time is of the essence. But the patient hunter, with his skill, never misses his target. If patience is required, patience is applied. And the raven is as patient as they come. It was the still of the night, and the owls were twirling. The silence of the night as the crickets had ended their song. The whispers were as strong and as bright, whispers in the night. And the raven flutters from one side out of the light into the night. And what does he see? Perched on a magnolia branch, he is able to discern the location of the documents, the very documents that could save mankind from the tyranny of a very, very dangerous king. These documents would cost the king his head in the wrong hands. But the raven has no hands. Shall the king sleep fitly and softly as he may? And as the watcher, I watched all the kings of the world sleep soundly and smoothly. The most delicious luxuries shall they enjoy. The king sleeps softly. The king sleeps as softly and as luxuriously as he lives, in luxury and no concern. No concerns in the world. There's no finer life than to be a king in the earth. And the king sumptuously enjoys his privilege, and some overstep their bounds. And as the watcher, I have selected certain crowns. As they bear my scrutiny, and my objectives are to bend their crown, break their thorn, and their scourge on history shall be a stain removed. As the watcher, I had to fight the urge to become passionate in my duties, in my opportunities to go into the earth and participate in the doings, a freedom allowed at the very end of the timeline. And I was well aware of the effects even a small change could make. And I would have to pay the price for any suffering that my alterations would arouse. And so I was very careful in my selections. And believe me, the purpose of my assassinations would be not of their flesh nor their wounds, but I intend to assassinate their evil character that permeates, that fogs the earth. The stench is an affront to the daffodil. And perhaps I am tilting windmills. And if that would help, I certainly would. You've been listening to the Watcher series, where the Watcher continues his post watching humanity. And as the timelines come to the end, he is allowed to participate if he dares. And so far, tonight's story, the Watchman has taken vengeance upon a king in some time where men awoke each morning, just like you and I, had their oatmeal and muesli, and had to get the carriage fixed and went somewhere and did something important. Time is relative, but tyranny is not. The moon cast irregular shadows upon the gathering. There were multiple murders of willing ravens. The owl, field mice, and the wolf, a lone gray alpha, and a host of the fairies was present. To document the arrangements, nymphs had gathered out of curiosity, but soon shuttled about in diverse points, unsure if there was profit to be had. The objective was twofold. Adrian the Dreaded was the king of the kingdom of Baru-Baran, in general proximity to modern-day Hungary. Adrian the Dreaded had enlisted the dark powers through his association with alchemists. His sordid deeds were diabolically and mercilessly carried forth, and he drank the blood of virgins to maintain his youth for several centuries. He claimed immortality and crushed his opponents. His chambers of torture were unequal to our own day. The proclamation he was to sign by the cock's early call. The proclamation would have extended his kingdom to the fine lands near Bavaria and Bohemia. The firstborn male child and the first three female children were bound to the throne and would live a very short-lived servitude
and eventually Adrian would partake of their life essence in their pure, innocent blood. Adrian's brother Amadeus was held in the East Tower of Adrian's castle. He was mercilessly tortured by the hour. Our plan was to remove the 4 pages of the proclamation via the murders of Raven and replace the bottom 3 with a plea for Amadeus' pardon. The owl was watching the proceedings from the West Tower, facing Amadeus' dungeon. The field mice orchestrated entry to the castle gallery. The hope would be to create a distraction with the servants, while I returned a purloined quill from Adrian's nightstand. The quill was coated with a balm fashioned by a trusted alchemist. An alchemist who lived a solitary existence in the wood. When Adrian reaches for his quill, his fingers will begin to tremble after he has signed his proclamation, which was actually the plea for pardon of Amadeus as we switched the last 3 pages. He would also relinquish his throne with his signature. The trembling in his hand and body and mind would rob him of his night's rest, and he would gasp for air and with all certainty revel into the wood, perhaps seeking out the solitary alchemist. It is that point of the wood he would encounter the lone gray alpha. The alpha proceeding from this point near the wood of the alchemist. No witness save the gray alpha would record the events of the wood and the night. Much evil will have been avoided with the disappearance of Adrian, and Amadeus would reign with great prosperity, changing the course of events to this day. As I said, I am the Watcher, yet tonight I act with a concert of creatures of the night. Hi, Frank Boomer with you, and thanks to be with my friends again here. You know, my audience is growing by leaps and bounds, and so I am struggling to find something that would be worthwhile of all these people's times. I read the news, I see the events unfolding, and I ask, is that important to everyone? My worldwide podcast? I have to have something that's going to interest the whole world. The whole world doesn't care about Mask in Athens, Georgia. The whole world doesn't care about Seattle. The whole world doesn't care about the American election. No, so Frank had to dig deep into his Rolodex. Now listen, I've done interviews with people that you could almost say were a little more than people. I've interviewed sentient beings. I have interviewed spirits. I have interviewed men who channel spirits, women who channel spirits. I interviewed anything that will respond. That is my trademark, my imprint upon this world, and the reason for the Frank Boomer Show is to find everything I can about life and share it. Because that's what life is discovery. An epiphany, can't even say the word. You know what I'm talking about, an epiphany. Some idea comes floating in like a beetle. Not one of those beetles that has the cameras, you understand. But an epiphany came upon Frank that he owes his listeners a good interview. I just did a great interview with a warrior who we will still do many interviews with this warrior, Melanie, as she is truly, possibly the last rebel, the last person capable of a genuine revolution with a purpose and an end game and all of the right reasons you would fight a revolution. She's a revolutionary, and I enjoy delving into her attempts to implant justice into the world. But even her interview will be put a bit to the pale when you hear my next guest. Frank Boomer has arranged an interview with God. Now, some of you listeners may want to ask God a question. If you can contact the show, this interview has been scheduled at some point in the future. It is not happening right now. But if you have a question you'd like me to throw in there on my question list, contact the show. For example, here are some questions I was going to ask him. I'm still working on the questions. When you interview someone of great proportion, the key is the questions you ask, because that's the show. And so if I'm interviewing God, I've got to ask good questions. My first question, what were you thinking when you made man and the earth? And so God's going to answer that. My other question is, why is the solar system designed the way it is? Just because I'd like to have some closure as to how it really works. And then my third question, what do you enjoy doing the most? And then, how did you become God? Those are kind of like my primer starter questions. I'm sure God will fill in the space just with that little sample with quite a bit of entertaining information and fun and frolic, perhaps. Don't miss the Frank Boomer Interview with God. Now, don't think I took this lightly, folks, this interview with God. I've heard some things about this God. When he came to speak to some people on the earth, they were trembling at his sight. And so, there is one key to an interview, is that no matter how lofty a person may be, no matter what his responsibilities might entail, as the questioner, you have to induce the interview, the subject, to relax and be himself, to speak freely and without an agenda and whatnot. We want a genuine interview. And so I must relinquish my fear of offending him, which I would certainly keep that in mind. But that's always the case with anybody I interview. I respect them, and I certainly do not intend
to offend any of my guests on the show who I do interviews with. Even if it's a contentious interview, I respect the other party. So I'm relying on that being enough when I do my interview with God. My other fear is that I do not ask him questions that he feels are worthy of this momentous occasion. But quite frankly, folks, Frank would like to have a little help with this. I've lined up the interview. All the dynamics are in place. We know when, where, and how we're going to do it, how long it's going to last. He's agreed to be a guest in that format as the interview subject. How amazing is that? I would like my listeners to send me at least one question to add to my litany of questions when I do my interview with God. So get those questions ready. I don't care how big or little. I will take a dozen. The interview has no time limit. I'll take 12 questions from my audience. If I get a really nice one on top of that, I might even take more. Contact the show. You should be able to contact the show in some fashion. We're still working on getting the websites and all those things connected because we're tied in with endless adventure in so many ways that you may have to go through those loops to get to the Frank Boomer Show. However, we are working on some other arrangements where you can hit a button and instantly get to the Frank Boomer website, which is in the works as we speak. As I said, I came out of retirement. And back in my day, the media was nowhere near what it is now. There was no possible way someone could walk into a room in his house with a little bit of equipment he could buy at Radio Shack and speak to the world just like Walter Cronkite. Communications in those days was huge organizations, and you plowed your way through to get to the top. It was a corporate battle, and when you finally got your mouth on that microphone, you were set for life, and you could say whatever you wanted. Of course, I'm sure there are controls. But the media is different now. Anybody with a wife-beater t-shirt and a stray cat with some cat food and tuna and a microphone can do a podcast. And so I came out of retirement into this ridiculous world of democratic expression for the masses. And I'm still having trouble getting used to it. So that's really a concept, folks. Democratic expression for the masses. That sounds like a great idea. It sounds like exactly the idea that was expressed during the American Revolution, when they signed the Magna Carta. It seems to have been a lifelong, eternal desire of men and women, and cats and dogs perhaps as well, to express themselves freely and be sure they are heard and are willing to deal with responses. Yes, mass communications used to be something they offered in college. It was very discouraging how they put that great title, Mass Communication. That's what I want to do. I remember sitting in the car when I went to apply at my first university. A dear friend had taken me there and told me what to say and how to say it and all those things, but at some point I was alone. But while I was perusing the options, almost like going to the giant Costco in the sky,
What do I want to know? These people will teach me exactly what I want to know. And they will teach me what I want to know to earn a certain amount of money. It was awesome. The opportunity college provides a young man today is a wondrous opportunity, something that we've fought for and struggled throughout history to be educated, to know real information that can help ourselves and our children. Mass communications. There is an art to communicating to the masses. You must communicate with the masses much different than you do with someone face to face. But see, Frank never bought that. I never did. I don't see why you would communicate in a mass manner any different than you would one-on-one. And that's why I love waking up in this timeline. Not involved in the communications industry, the mass communications, all a thing of the past. Frank wakes up, hears the crickets, enjoys his little ranch. I call it a ranch because it's far and wide to Frank's eyes, a beautiful place. The sun comes up just right. The moon always sets in the right spot, and the stars are sprinkled perfectly among the tree lines. I could not ask or define a more beautiful place to reside. So in that sense, Frank is very happy. But I was induced to jump back into the fray. And I find the world of mass communications is a very strange place indeed. And that's why you may have noticed I jumped on the media immediately. They were doing exactly what I was taught you could not do. You should not do if you could, but you could not do, and you should never do. And this is the order of the day now. There are no rules. So why did I go to learn how to express myself in a mass communication manner if the teachers have violated all the teachings? Hi, Frank Boomer. Yes, the great philosophers, I believe, were loners. They thought of things in impeccable ways, perfect manners of expression. They thought of the ideal, and their belief was that if they imparted the ideal, the masses would take what they would, and the overall boat would be lifted. A noble aim, I suppose. Frank believes that everybody is a philosopher. Everybody is a philosopher. I was sitting on a park bench yesterday, and a grizzled man came up, and it was very hot. I think it was 100 degrees. Humidity was off the charts. We were sitting there sweating. And I was waiting for the inevitable, could I have a couple of bucks and stuff? And so I just got that ready. And it turns out that this man, though slightly disheveled, he's living in a shelter, I believe. I had spoken to him earlier, and he recognized me, and he said, "Hi, Frank." And I recognized him, and I said, "Hello, Bob, how are you?" His name was actually Robert. And I was doing some editing on some of my podcast out there, trying to use my time wisely. And he noticed I had a cell phone in my hand, and he wanted to make a phone call. So I said, "Sure, go ahead." And so I let him make his call. And he handed the phone back to me. I went back to my editing, and then by accident, I actually hit the record button, which on a little portable recorder on the phone, which I use that too. You can
get all kind of things from real life. And we got to talking, and it turns out this man has a book he has written. It is published by Simon & Schuster. And he also has acted in Hollywood. He's in the Hollywood Guild. He can act in Hollywood, but there's a producer or some man of power in New Jersey that's been handling his affairs, and for whatever reason, he's hit some hard times at the moment. And so I learned all that by simply saying a little more than hi, sitting on the park bench. So the world is a very strange place, folks, and Frank Boomer, all I'm trying to do with this show is to give the world a little assist so you can be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Hi, welcome to the Frank Boomer Report, the Frank Boomer Podcast, Your Time with Frank. Thanks for joining us. Some things I'm trying to do with the Frank Boomer Podcast currently is that I have my eyes on NPR. See, I used to listen to NPR quite a bit, and I suppose I absorbed some of their politics over 20 years or more of listening and being a I basically contribute to NPR, or have. I don't now. I've noticed a decline in even their attempts to be fair and to show both sides. And I am going to first check on the legal aspects, but I've been collecting clips from NPR because I hear these things and I can only stand it like 10 minutes at a time before I realize this is total brainwash. This is not even worth my time. And I turn it off. And it angers me, and I can't express it to anyone because they didn't hear the clips. They didn't see the insinuations, and they didn't see how they're just manipulating the real facts in a certain way. And they are NPR, the voice of reason, the lone place someone can go who is troubled by bullshit left, bullshit right. You can always go to NPR, but you can't no more. And I'm going to prove it. I'm collecting snippets from real NPR shows, and I think they will illustrate my point. I'm going to have to check to see if it's legal to do so. I don't really care. Of course I care if it's legal. But if I don't, there's people above me that will check. But that's what I'm going to do. And just railing about it's not enough. I got to let you see it, hear it. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm also going to start keeping my microphone handy as I go to the post office or go buy a dozen eggs. And I'm going to see if we get some interesting live, real people moments or interviews perhaps. Meeting that gentleman on the park bench was an eye-opener for me, that's for sure. So the Frank Boomer Report, it is not changing, it is simply evolving, and then it is twisting and turning according to the demands of the situation. I will still keep you up to date on current events, like you really need to hear more. I think of myself more as an interpreter of events. You can buy my interpretation, or you can repel it. You can disagree. But free speech is the last vestige of civilization, and it is being infringed right before our lips, gentlemen and ladies. And that is when the gentleman Conrad Buckingham I met him on the golf course. We were hitting a few out there on the Oconee course. They got a nice course out there. You see, I live in a place where all the money went to where the Creek Indians used to live. And the Democratic machine took over the old town. And it's a Bolshevik stronghold. But you can still go about 20 miles northwest and see civilization as it was intended. Nice homes, really nice homes, green grass, golf carts, shopping centers, and all the joys of modern consumerism at your disposal. And so Frank is sitting here on his ranch within a stone's throw of the epitome of Bolshevik terrorism. Drive another 20 miles and you've got the epicenter of republicanism, consumerism, and the modern economics of America, all going full bore 20 miles apart. It's an interesting scenario. And so I decided to take advantage of it because I can study two world dynamics opposing each other right in my backyard, so to speak. So that's an advantage. But I've realized that's only a small portion of the whole picture. There's more. I have a worldwide audience, and the same lure that brought me back to the microphone has been needling my spine and telling me I must tell the people more than Bolsheviks and oligarchs. Sure, they are operating. Sure, they affect life daily. But the people, your audience, the mass communication you've been brought to attend to, needs more. It needs your input, for one thing. And so the website is being designed so you can listen to a Frank Boomer podcast. And hopefully you will respond. And then the creation begins, because in all creation, dualism, there must be a force and an opposing force, and the intelligent manipulation of that force is the creation. So we cannot do anything alone. That's the hard, tough lesson of life, that you cannot do any one thing alone. Now, I suppose in my heart of hearts, I desire to be a loner, would love to do whatever I do with no interaction with anything else. But I concede to reality. And I also learn that it's kind of fun to do things together. Thank you for listening to this 2-in-1 doublecast, where we gave you a drama from Endless Adventure called the Watcher series. This is a premiere, something new. We also doubled up and gave you a Frank Boomer live report without having to search for something new. You see, at Endless Adventure, we would like to interact with the audience. If you would like to respond to the show, be sure to look for the Frank Boomer website as well as the Endless Adventure website. Listener feedback is not only encouraged, it is rewarded.